The Hog's Tie is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogstie.com.
The Hog's Tie presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hog's Tie Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports, industrial, entertainment complex. I am joined by my brothers in arms, Steve and Rich. How you doing today?
Oh, just awesome. There's so many good things to talk about. This is one of these shows where we had to narrow down the topics because there's all sorts of good, interesting football and other sports stories. So it's a good day.
I'm doing great. As you guys, I shared with you guys off air, I just started this deep water fitness class to kind of stay away from the weights because I generally end up in the hospital. But I am probably the youngest guy in the class by like 20 years. So I'm enjoying it. But maybe my AARP card, I can get stamped by coming in.
You're taking an old man class?
Well, it's like, it's deep water fitness. You have to use a noodle and all this kind of stuff. So.
It's like one of these things where you're moving slowly in water.
Yeah, it's like aerobics in the water, and people are doing like these weird, okay, now we're going to jog in the water, and we're going to do this, and we're going to breaststroke. I'm like,
it's like it's straight out of the Golden Girls or something.
Yes, but you know what? It's actually a really good workout.
A new go-go group taking DC by storm is Rich and the Geriatrics.
I know, right? Yeah, with me, yes. With me on drums.
You are secure enough in yourself. You can take an old man class and an old lady class.
Yes.
I like that. All
right, so enough brevity. Let's get on with the show. First topic we're going to dive into, is a pool that we have dipped in and out of for probably the last 8 or 9 months, which is the ongoing NFL stadium protest, collusion.
Don't sound so excited.
Yeah, and
can tell you
today's wheel of misfortune falls on the Eric Reid case, who this week just filed a collusion grievance with the NFL. About the fact that he is not yet on an NFL roster here, post-draft 2018, preseason NFL, and he claims that is because he is a kneeler. And so that goes on to an independent counsel arbitration between the NFL, the Reid, and the NFL Players Association. So let's get an explainer from Steve on the legalese, and then discuss the nuance.
Okay, because I know Rich has an opinion on this. So the legalese part of it is this. The NFL's collective bargaining agreement says that NFL teams cannot collude with one another to make football decisions regarding players and other things. And they define what collusion is. And the definition is Article 17.1a, which says no club, its employees, or agents shall enter into any agreement, express or implied, with the NFL or any other club, its employees or agents, to restrict or limit club decision-making. That's what collusion is. And the non-legalese part of it means that 32 teams can come to the same decision, and that's fine. But if one or more teams get together and decide we don't like this guy for whatever reason, he's got purple hair, and we're not going to hire him because unofficially we don't want people with purple hair, then that's collusion. The case goes to an arbiter, like Chris mentioned, and that's because the CBA requires arbitration of these things. They want to stay out of court, so that's why. And there's a list of arbiters that usually hear this case. There's an article, if you want to read about this, in SBNation.com. It's from May 3rd. Title is A Law Professor Explains Why It'll Be a Bitch for Eric Reid to Prove Collusion. So the arbiter's name in this case, who's probably going to have the case, is Stephen Burbank, who's from Penn Law, professor at Penn Law. So the gist of it here is the case goes to arbitration. Reid has to prove Number one, that he's a qualified NFL safety. Number two, teams have colluded for one reason or another, presumably because of the kneeling anthem protest, to keep him out of court or out of the league. So that's kind of the gist of it. I'd like to kick it to Rich because I know you have an opinion. What do you want to say, Rich?
So I think that it's not about what you can state; it's about what you can prove. So from the legal standpoint, I agree it's going to be a tough road ahead to prove. But I think the one area that people don't consider is, do people actually put it past these rich white billionaire owners to be able to actually do this? And we've seen countless situations where I wouldn't put this past owners in the least bit, and I'm going to tell you why. If the Cincinnati Bengals asked Eric Reid, do you plan to kneel? And he said, well, I don't plan to. They still didn't sign him. That's their prerogative. But the fact that they even asked him, they actually put that out there, is damning to me. I think that you look at Colin Kaepernick and you look at Eric Reid. Clearly, this anthem protest has hit a nerve with America, and there are people that do not watch the NFL anymore because of it. And I get from the NFL owner standpoint, it could be bad for business. But what people don't understand and will not admit, that there is a racial undertone to this. These are two African American players who do not have a job in the league. Yes, Colin Kaepernick is better than Tom Savage, and Eric Reid should be on an NFL roster. And what people don't want to address is the fact that the owners can do this, and the owners have they have the capability to do it, and they probably have the will to do it. And it's not even that difficult for them to get together in an owners meeting in a back room and say, hey guys, look, what do you think about this? I don't want it. It's bad for business, but I will not allow at least the issue of race in this to be swept under the rug. NFL owners and maybe NFL fans, in some cases, they want their NFL players, as the lady said, shut up and dribble to LeBron James. Shut up and play. They want their athletes big, strong, and dumb. And we don't care what you think about anything outside of football. And that's my opinion.
I hear you. I think, first of all, like you said, either of these players, Kaepernick or Reid, actually proving collusion is an incredibly hard road to hoe here, because they need to find evidence of an agreement that's direct evidence, and that's not just speculation. And so they need to find emails, audio recordings, deposition testimony in which an owner admits this, and I think it's highly unlikely that any of that's actually going to happen. So, and on top of that, the evidentiary standard here is clear preponderance of the evidence, which is a bit, when the word clear tells me it's a bit higher of a standard than your normal like negligence case in court. So I think it's tough. In terms of the substance of what Rich said, I think it's obvious. Of course, this is about the kneeling anthem protest. Yeah, the safety market's been a little dried up. Yes. But Reid is 26 years old. He's been to a Pro Bowl. He is more than capable, more than good enough to be playing on an NFL roster. I'm not sure I totally agree about Kaepernick. But is he better than Tom Savage, or whoever? Yes, probably so. I think that, so yes, obviously it's about the kneeling, and yes, there's a racial undertone because the nature of what they're protesting has to do with originally was about police brutality, and we can debate another day about the nature of their protests. I hated it. Other people applauded it. So yeah, yes, there's a racial undertone. Yes, it's about the kneeling. What I've always said here is that teams don't want, especially with Kaepernick, who's a backup quality player, I think, they do not want a backup to come in and alienate 50% of their customer base, or whatever the percentage is. It's not worth it for them to sign a player like that. And I think that alone is probably enough to make most of these franchises not want to sign either one of them. My thoughts.
So let me stick to some of the elements of the case, then I'll probably spiral out from there. One, I just think so I agree. I think we have consensus that it is difficult for this case to be won on all of the legal parts of it. So I think we all are basically singing the same tune there. So I would agree. I think Reed has a better case than Kaepernick for a couple of interesting reasons. One, for what Rich said, where you've got some conversations on tape. I think it's I think for the same reason Steve says, you could make an argument that Reed should probably be a starter in the NFL, and you could at least have a more nuanced debate around that. Plus, the difference between a backup quarterback and a rotational or starting DB is a much different situation on the mechanics of a football team. I think being the second person to file, I think actually strengthens his case. I think probably I'm not backing off my claim that he probably has a hard time winning, but I think he's got a stronger case that you look across those factors. I mean, let's be honest. Reed would make the Redskins' defensive backfield better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and that statement is true for probably, half the teams in the league, unscientific guess. So I think on the football merits of it, the case is quite strong in terms of, should he be on a team, on a roster? Yes. 26 stats, Pro Bowl. It's very difficult to slice and dice that a different way. This is what I say. This is what's actually happening, and this is why it'll be hard to prove. Rich, I might slightly disagree with you, and this is maybe not even a disagreement, but I don't think there's necessarily a back room where they're looking, don't sign Reed, we're all in, don't sign Reed. But, these guys, they know how to silently do these kind of collusion type things. They don't which means there's no paper or any kind of record. So you can have, there can be the spirit of collusion without legal collusion, which I think is what's happening here. And you probably even claim all 32 owners have the same I don't want the business headache, and they could never have talked to each other about that, but that would be a smart business play. And so you could even say, even if they have the same outcome, they weren't in coordination. But I think it is collusion in spirit or unspoken for sure. If I was Eric Reed, the one thing, if I was Reed and his people, file this September 1st. I think one thing is we're too much, there's, Laval just signed with the Redskins. There's still rounds of bargain basement free agent signings between now and close of rosters. So if he wasn't, and probably hurts his own career, because now no one's going to sign him. That's pretty much guaranteed, even though the smart move by the NFL would be someone to sign him, because then you can nullify the case, but that's not going to happen. So I would have filed it at kickoff game 1 if he's still not on a roster. I think it's a little bit of a weaker position to file it now.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to say, so, Steve, you've gone through all the legalese. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. Essentially, what are we really talking about here? We're really talking about two players who possibly are being denied an opportunity to make a living because they're expressing their First Amendment rights. That is un-American. We hear all of this stuff about Second Amendment rights, and we have rights to this, but essentially, you can disagree with what they do, you can disagree with what they say, but essentially, the bottom line question is, are they being denied an opportunity to make a living based on them expressing their First Amendment rights? And is this something that the NFL owners have a sort of a wink and a nod in having a hand in? And again, they haven't done anything illegal. So what are we really talking about here?
Well, first of all, as to the First Amendment issue, I don't think there's a First Amendment issue here. The NFL is a private entity, and the NFL teams are all private for-profit businesses. NFL games are privately held entertainment events broadcast on privately held networks for the purposes of making money. And the First Amendment has to do with the government censoring the people, because the people have the right to speak out against the government or about whatever they want. And so, to me, the idea would be, if there's, let's say, to put it in a flag context, I don't want to put it in a flag context. If the federal government, the state government, or a local government was trying to limit what Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid said or did, or how they express themselves, that's one thing. But the NFL limiting how players express themselves is legal. It's constitutional. There's nothing wrong with it. They do it already for a whole number of things. Specifically, advertisements, for example. Players cannot wear advertisements on their person during games, for example. And players have been fined for it. Who's a Redskins player, for example, last year got fined for having too many Nike logos on his uniform, which is crazy. That's another topic because Nike's an NFL sponsor. But my point is the NFL, the NFL, for example, limits the players' right to criticize the referees. They're entirely within their rights to do that. This is no different. The NFL, as a private company, can limit the speech of its employees. So there's that. And I understand the NFL is not wanting to have political speech come up in their televised game broadcasts. I understand that. So I think that there's not really a First Amendment thing here. I think it'd be one thing morally if, say, Eric Reid and Colin Kaepernick express these views not on game time, in interviews. Maybe they would write a piece for the Undisputed, for example. Or anything else, that's one thing. But the idea of the NFL limiting or not liking what people do in the middle of games, to me, is understandable and totally within the ethical and moral bounds of what the NFL.
So understandable to the point where they don't get jobs anymore. So does anyone? Okay, so okay, I get that. But I mean, we like to make things. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but we like to make things. We like to overanalyze. Colin Kaepernick can play quarterback better than probably half of the backups in this league. Eric Reid is a very probably good safety, and he's a starter. And so we're going through this clearly. As I said, there's a racial element here, and clearly there is. To me, it's saying. We don't want these guys. The Cincinnati Bengals basically outed themselves. Do you plan to protest? I mean, that to me says that.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Rich. I think, is there a racial component? Yeah, sure. I mean, are some owners afraid of having the angry black man on the team? You probably so. But in terms of the collusion part of it, I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that all these teams independently decided, the headache of Colin Kaepernick isn't worth it. The headache of Colin Kaepernick isn't worth it. And I don't think that's collusion. That may just be smart business.
Well, let me say this. Yeah, as an educator, and I've been a principal and school vice principal, principals and vice principals pick up the phone all the time if they get an applicant sometimes and say, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Oh, I don't know. You may not want. I mean, come on, man. People do it all. Well,
do I have reason to doubt that, like, the owner of the Bengals called the owner of the 49ers or something, said, is this Reid guy really a pain in the butt, or some words to that effect? I mean, that might have happened. Mm-hmm. Sure. I would believe that. They're never going to be able to prove that. That's never going to be able to be proved.
That's true. From a legal standpoint, it's what you can prove. Yeah. I get it.
Well, what's morally right or wrong, to me, it's about business more than anything. I don't think that the NFL really has any responsibility to let players promote any political cause. And I'd say the same thing if there's like somebody who's promoting Second Amendment gun, for the Second Amendment rights, for example, and they want to have a protest, or carry a sign or something like that. I don't think the NFL necessarily has to let that happen either. And so to me, yes, there's a racial undertone to it because the entire basis of the protest was racially based. Yes, I think there are people in this country, and probably including some owners, that are uncomfortable with the idea of young African-American men who will openly express themselves in controversial ways. Yes, there's no doubt owners out there like that. From a legal perspective, though, I just think from a business and legal perspective, they have every right to not hire somebody. For if they think that they don't have the right to hire somebody because they're black. to not hire somebody because they're black. What they do have the right to do is not hire somebody because it's going to hurt business. And from that respect, I can see why particularly Kaepernick has not been signed, because I think Kaepernick is a lightning rod of a whole nother level than Eric Reed. Your average person on the street who's not a football fan doesn't know who Eric Reed is. Everybody knows who Kaepernick is. He's a real lightning rod. I think Reed actually has a stronger case than Kaepernick does.
I do too. I think it'd be the more interesting one to see what plays out. It also is one where, for the exact same reasons that you just said, Steve, I think the NFL, let me clarify that, the NFL owners are get him on a roster. The damage that this potentially does over time, this path, to me, is exponentially greater than him being on a roster, especially if he's starting to consider not kneeling or what have you. I think that's.
See, the NFL really can't dictate that either, though.
I'm kneeling for the rest. I'm kneeling for the rest of this segment. But go ahead.
Rich is kneeling now. That's okay. Rich can kneel.
In deep water.
And let me make clear about my position. If I were an owner, I would not sign a player who can't guarantee they won't kneel. I just feel that strongly about the anthem protest stuff. It means a lot to me, and so I would be an owner who refused to sign these players. So I just wanted to get my bias out there, because I do have that bias.
So because you disagree, you're denying them a living.
Yes.
Well, then that's.
What I'm denying them is I don't think I have I don't have an obligation to sign anybody. If I'm an owner, I can sign.
No, you don't
any
have
of these
obligation. I'm just saying. You said, because that's something, and it's probably you're not the only one. That's something near and dear to you. You made it very clear before. That you are ex-military, and you.
And now you and I've talked about this off the air. You know how I feel.
So what I'm saying is, because that's something in your value and something that you value and that they violated, then you're saying
I wouldn't hire.
You would not hire them. And
correct.
Okay, and I'm saying that to me is, don't we all work with people that we have different views on?
Well, that's not the thing. I would respect their view. I actually don't disagree with some of what they're protesting. Is there police brutality out there in this country that is unnecessary? Yes. Are there police out there who are targeting African American men, young African American men in particular? Yes. Are there corrupt police out there? Yes. I mean, the history of the LAPD alone, shows you how discriminatory their policing practices have been. I don't disagree with that, and I would actually support, to some extent or another, the causes that they are advocating. Let me make that clear too. And I would stand with them in solidarity to a certain extent about what they're protesting for. But the manner in which they brought the issue to light is so offensive to me that I can't go there with them. If you want me to stand with you at a press conference, sure. If you want me to go out on the street and hold a sign with you about it, sure. If you want me to sit in an interview with you and talk about it, is from my experiences as a white man, in my view, sure, I'll do that. But I'm not kneeling with you
and that's fair.
In the middle of the national anthem.
And that's fair.
But that actually, in some ways, that strengthens Eric Reed's case, right? Because no one's
strengthened the collusion case.
Well, except no one's even willing to bring him in and have that conversation about what he would plan to do if they signed him.
Well, the Bengals did. I mean, the article I gave cited what the Bengals said. Let's just quote this. Mike Brown owns the Bengals. Team owner Mike Brown reportedly asked Reed about his kneeling and told him he intended to prohibit it. Reed wouldn't make a commitment to the team about whether he would kneel at the time. When he would later be asked by head coach Marvin Lewis if he wished to clarify his stance on kneeling, and Reed declined. So at least if this article is held to be true, and again, this is SB Nation, Harry Lyles Jr. wrote this. Apparently the Bengals did not get the sense that Reed would not kneel, and so they didn't sign him. Which is a little different than what we came out before, because Rich, what you said is what I had heard, which is that Reed had said, "I'm not going to kneel anymore." I thought that was.
I heard him. I thought the quote was, "I don't plan to." I mean, I thought he said something to the effect of that he doesn't plan to continue his anthem protest.
There was some quote to that effect out there, but that's not what what this article claims that he told the Bengals. And so, to that respect, I can see why the Bengals wouldn't sign him. But if Reed is done with the protest, and Reed needs to say it again out loud right now, because I think it would strengthen his case.
Well, can I let me kind of bring this, and I know we go on, and I'm going to kind of just bear with me for a minute.
Yeah.
The fact that when you look at how Darius Geis fell to pick 59, and multiple teams passed on him, and apparently, and this kind of goes to what the capability of NFL teams are. Unless there's some evidence of something that has happened or there's an active investigation that we don't know about, why is it that an NFL...
Doug Williams said there's not.
Right. Why is it that an NFL team... Well, I know why they're allowed, because they're a private entity. But there's no evidence that this young man has done anything that would allow him to drop to pick 59 just over rumors. So I bring that point up to say, if the NFL can sort of have a collective opinion that we want to stay as far away from this guy as possible, that the second best running back in the draft can drop that far, you don't think that they can't get together and say, we're going to keep this other guy out the league? I brought it's loosely related. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think any team got together with other teams and said, hey, we're not going to sign guys. I think these teams, particularly when it comes to the draft, are paranoid, and they've been burned a million times. They got burned on Johnny Manziel. They got burned on Randy Gregory, and a bunch of others. And so I think these teams just freak out when they hear anything negative on draft day, and the guys just drop like a rock. Like, who was the guy who wore the lineman? Jeremy Tunsil. Yeah, right. Him. I mean, there was a video that came out on draft day of him in a gas mask, and I don't know how, I'm not a weed guy, but somehow he's smoking weed through this thing.
Yeah.
And that made him drop like a rock, And so I don't think that's collusion. I think that's teams going, oh my God, we don't want a troublemaker. I do think in terms of guys, it's unfair to guys. Sure it is. There's, is there evidence that he's a bad guy? No. I mean, he's probably immature. He's probably inexperienced. He's not sophisticated. Is he a bad guy? I don't think he is, and neither does Doug Williams. I don't think that's collusion. That's just the NFL being paranoid. And I would say, in terms of that, last thing, like Johnny Manziel did not get a second chance. He's a white guy, and he's a big mess. He's a far bigger mess than Geis, Reed, or Kaepernick. He's a drug addict and all that. But I think the NFL has kind of blackballed him, like they're blackballing Colin Kaepernick. That doesn't mean anybody's colluding. That means...
I don't think that's the same thing, because I think Colin Kaepernick hasn't, hit people with... I mean, he hasn't done some of the immature...
And Manziel got convicted of some form of domestic violence.
Yeah, that's not apples
I
to
can't remember the
apples,
charge.
but we can move on.
Maybe not. But yeah, let's move on. I think we all said our piece. Chris?
Huh?
Uh-oh. We're having issues here, people. Stand by here. Because we can't actually hear Chris right now, so we're kind of vamping here.
Oh, sorry.
You are a professional. Turn your microphone on.
We do have... Sorry, I was eliminating background noise and then forgot to unmute.
You eliminated yourself.
Maybe that's background noise.
We may edit a bit of this.
No, but we do have official board bet here that Manziel will, I think, be
I
on
forgot.
another NFL roster. It's one of the stories that
Yes.
we'll track over time.
We have a bet. No, I can't remember who bet what, though.
Rich and I think, are on the side that Menzel will get
Absolutely.
another NFL shot.
Yes.
And Steve, that you are not. Just
Yeah,
to
I
keep
still think that.
the listeners aware of.
Did we have
running-
any terms of the bet? What did we bet?
No, we got to figure that out.
Okay.
That out. If anyone out there in listener land has any ideas, we'd love to hear them. You can tweet them at the Hogsty. All right, we're going to move on to social issues, racism, and controversy in the NFL, to sexism, controversy, and social issues in the NFL. So this week...
Segue of the season there.
This The New York Times reported on a story with the Washington Redskins about a 2013 episode where the Redskins cheerleaders the cheerleading team were flown to Costa Rica to an adults-only resort to do the calendar shoot. Fairly standard thing. Most teams do calendar shoots, et cetera, et cetera. And while there, this article contends that I think 7 to 9 of them, a subset, were handpicked or chosen. Some of how is up in the air and is disputed, but chosen to go back to gussy themselves up and to be brought in for a private review. And it was apparently shirts optional, maybe not optional. And then to sort of basically, just to cut to the chase, do a bit of a pop-up strip club for season ticket holders, I think partners, donors, high rollers in the Redskins world. Also, the cheerleaders were surprised, the full team were surprised that they had an audience at all, which basically the Redskins, at least, allegedly, were brought in high rollers to watch the whole thing, the shoot, the behind the scenes, which, I don't think is standing operating procedure to essentially bring in observers, so to speak, for these kinds of photo shoots. We talked about this. I'll kick it over in 2 seconds. We actually talked about this last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago, not in the particulars of this case, but these kind of Me Too type issues in NFL cheerleading. And sure enough, within 14 days, one very specific case blows up and becomes, really the focal point for this whole issue, where before it was a little bit vague or, yes, of course, cheerleading is sexist. Now we've got one story to look at. And of course, without fail, it centers around the Washington Redskins.
Can I tell a quick NFL calendar story before we get into this?
Sure.
Don't mind. Okay. I've said here on the show before that I represented a couple NFL teams as outside counsel. And one of these times I'm over in the team facility, and we was over there every day for like 2 weeks negotiating a major national sponsorship thing worth tens and tens of millions of dollars. And this guy from the other side is droning on and on about this contract, and he's arguing about every comma and every period, and everybody wants to just hang themselves. And so the team's marketing guy is in there, and once he could tell everybody's just frustrated, he gets up and walks out of the room, and he comes back with the team cheerleader calendar, and he just slides it really subtly with it open to a risque part of it in front of this lawyer for the sponsor, and just kind of leaves it sitting there, and it completely threw the guy off his game. It got him off of yelling about every comma and every period, and I thought it was really funny. So in that case, the NFL calendar directly was a direct benefit to a business negotiation. Look, NFL cheerleaders are underpaid, overworked. I think if you add it up, it probably costs them money to be an NFL cheerleader once you add everything in. I think it's abhorrent that they go on these photo shoots and aren't paid. The teams are making money off the calendars. Why on earth aren't they paying these ladies for the photos? So
what other swimsuit model in modeling anywhere does not get compensated for that work?
Zero.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing that's abhorrent to me, if you know anything about how photo shoots work and how in the entertainment industry works, if you are filming a risque scene or you're taking risque photos, it is a closed set. It is not an open set where you allow a bunch of yutzes and creepy old dudes to watch. That is abhorrent behavior to me. I don't think that should be done, and that bothers me alone. I don't have a problem necessarily that the cheerleaders are taking topless photos, because it most likely is a part of what they consented to when they became cheerleaders. There is probably a clause in either their employment contract or the terms presented to them that says we may ask you to pose in risque fashion. So I don't doubt that. It's having the creepy guys around, I think, is poor behavior, and especially obviously asking them to escort these sponsors to a nightclub is morally bankrupt in every way. I must say that the Redskins came out with one just awful statement early in the week about this. that basically was sort of giving the middle finger to the whole thing. And then a day later, they came to their senses and said, we're going to investigate this, and, we support the cheerleaders, blah, blah, blah. So it was, they finally said the right thing. It just took them a day, because, PR disaster equals Redskins. And the last thing I'll say is that some cheerleaders and some ex-cheerleaders have come out subsequent to the New York Times article and said this is not the way this happened at all, and this is a bunch of nonsense, and they're lying. So I think there's a factual dispute right now as to what happened. Rich, what do you think?
I think when you have allegations of sexual misconduct or anything sexual, just given the current political climate that we're in, or not even political climate, but social climate as well, you better be right. Because if what they're accusing the Redskins of doing is factually correct, then that is just, that's insane. But there have to be, so there, as you said, Steve, there's something that there are facts that are being disputed. I mean, I had a Twitter conversation with an ex-cheerleader who was actually there. And if you look on my Twitter page, she actually said that it did not happen the way that it was described. And so another commenter said, well, what, did Bruce get to you? And she said, I haven't even talked to the Redskins. I haven't even talked to Bruce Allen. I was there. This is my own opinion. So when you accuse and you write these stories about sexual misconduct, you have to be right. You can't just accuse someone of something of this magnitude. Cheerleaders also, and I watched a Today Show interview yesterday. They make their salary has jumped to $150 a game. So I mean, we laugh to keep from crying, but it's ridiculous. But at the same time, there are probably many women who are, they just had their cheerleader tryouts, and you've got tons of women lining up to do this.
Well, that's the reason why they're not paying them more, is because they don't have to.
Yeah,
there's a huge supply.
Yeah, so, I don't think this is probably exclusive to the Redskins. I think that this only furthers the conversation about, and rightfully so, on the exploitation of women. And women as sex objects. I go to a lot of games. The last thing I'm looking at is the cheerleaders. I actually have a church friend who is a current Redskins cheerleader. I haven't had an opportunity to see her and ask.
And she is not a guest on this show yet.
She's not a guest on the show yet. I actually can try to arrange that, but so I haven't had a chance to ask her about these allegations. But all of that to say, the part that's a big question mark for me is if these guys are having private rendezvous on a yacht or yacht parties with these women and using turkey bases to squirt liquor into their mouths and things like that, allegedly, who's the go? I want to find out who's the go-between. Who's the one that's actually arranging these? That's what I'm interested in.
Who's the Redskins pimp?
Yes.
Well, yeah, as an organization, the fact that the organization is allegedly doing this is awful. Okay, that's not what professionally run organizations do. And bear in mind that these women are either employees of the team or contractors of the team, one or the other, depending on how the business arrangement works. Professionally run organizations don't have naked yacht parties with turkey basters with their employees and make their employees do this. That is morally bankrupt, is what that is.
I agree.
And that is an awful way to go. And that's a huge, I think, part of the problem with this is that it gives the impression that the Redskins management has sanctioned this kind of behavior. I think there's a way to appropriately use cheerleaders. And I agree, Rich. I mean, when you go to a football game, number one, you can't see the cheerleaders. And number two, even if you did, you're really watching the game.
Right.
But there is the cheerleaders perform a valuable service for the team in community relations. The teams, all teams send these cheerleaders out to events. They'll have a cheerleader signing in the mall. they'll send the cheerleaders out to a car wash or out to a community event, and it gets the team's name out there in a positive light. And so I think the cheerleader program serves a function there as ambassadors of the team to the community. And so in that respect, I think it's a valuable program. But for God's sakes, this ain't the 19th century, people. You don't tell your employees to go escort creepy rich old guys to a nightclub. That's just, I can't tell you how much that bothers me. And anybody who's a father out there would definitely go kill somebody who did that to their daughter. I would hope.
Even if some of the facts and allegations are wrong in the specific New York Times piece, no one's disputing many of the things that are still wrong, right? So that article could end up being wrong, and some of those things, and what the Redskins are doing is still wrong, right? Like,
yeah,
in fact, the idea that, so let me get this straight. So when doing risque photo shoots, the Redskins are less ethical than Penthouse magazine.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they don't have Penthouse sponsors.
Yeah, you don't get
you
can't buy your way into that photo shoot, right? So the Redskins are less ethical taking nudie shots than Penthouse magazine.
Then what's that guy's name? The creepy guy in the wheelchair, right?
So,
yeah.
So let me ask this. Let me ask this. Though.
That was Hustler, technically, but
without I know that I might get in trouble, but I think this is worth.
That's okay.
Looking at it the other side. What if some of these women actually wanted to do that, though?
Wanted to do what?
What if they wanted to go and interact with these rich...
Well, then go. I mean, the problem to me is that the team allegedly forced them to do that.
The team should not be facilitating that.
Well, I know that. I know that. And not facilitating, and it's alleged that they're facilitating it. What I am saying is, who are the Redskins to say that if they wanted to go out to a club and they saw one of these guys and they actually wanted to go, and I'm not talking about sex and I'm not talking about that. Can the Redskins say, well, no, you're not doing that. You're not going to go out. I don't care what you want to do. You're not going to go on a yacht. You're not going to do this or do that.
It would be wise for them to do so.
I mean, they're already taking their passports. They're already treating them like indentured servants. So, they've already full control of their experience.
And what you're talking about is the New York Times alleged that the Redskins management took the passports of the cheerleaders upon arrival in Costa Rica. Which, if anybody's ever traveled internationally out there, you don't ever take somebody's passport.
Right.
Out of my dead hand,
Right. You let them keep it. And it's just a form of control. And to answer Rich's question, I think that if I were running a thing like that, first of all, I wouldn't have sponsors there at all. Okay, that would be totally out.
Yeah, that's out. Yeah.
But assuming that they were there, I do think what you would do is sit down with the ladies and say, okay, you're representing the Redskins. This is a professional thing. We are not going to have any the appearance of any sort of improprieties. And so in that regard, to the extent any of these gentlemen ask you to go anywhere, we're not doing that. And we'll see you tomorrow for day 2 of the shoot. Yeah. That's how I would handle it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, I was just trying to look at I'm not condoning any sort of, exploitation of women. I'm just looking at the other side. Because we're hearing conflicting reports. We're hearing some women say, hey, we didn't do anything we weren't forced to do anything. The lady on the young lady on the Today Show said she had a serious problem with the words being pimped out, because she said it was not her experience at all. And then you have others that are saying this is exactly true. So, we don't know where the truth is. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
But you can have those conflicting opinions by the participants. That still doesn't alleviate the fact that it is unsafe, probably illegal, and harmful work environment that the corporation, the Redskins, has fostered. So the participants can have different opinions about what they want to do, what it was. That doesn't mean it was a proper work environment. Right.
Well, you just said the magic word, Chris. I mean, you're talking about workplace violations, possible EEOC problems. This could be construed as sexual harassment, or at the very least improprieties. I think that's the problem. When an organization like the Redskins perpetuates stuff like this, and there was Redskins management there. Remember this. This wasn't just the head of the cheerleaders and a photographer. There were representatives from Redskins management there present in Costa Rica, and who at some level sanctioned this to one extent or another. And I think that is that is a poor way to handle things if you're a professional organization.
And it's not lost on me. This wasn't done in Virginia Beach. This wasn't done in Miami. This wasn't done in Los Angeles. This was done in a foreign country.
Makes it even worse.
Yeah. All right. Yay. So, moving on.
Happy show, people.
Can
Can you talk about something more interesting or something that's still not quite as negative, please?
Maybe we don't have personal connection as many myriad of personal connections as we've all stated in the past. We are not NASCAR fans per se, but we are going to talk about a business NASCAR subject, and that is it came out recently that NASCAR is ditching getting on the path of ditching their single sponsored their cup. They're basically their big year to year, you're the best racer in the top circuit type of deal. It's been called the Winston Cup. It's been called the Nextel Cup, the Sprint Cup, and for the last couple of years, it's been called the Monster Energy drink. No, energy drink sponsorship. And they have, in fact, signed a 1-year extension, so that I think will last into 2019. The timing of it's a little bit odd, but the significance of a 1-year contract rather than multiple 5, 10, which has been in the past, is signaled, and NASCAR is in fact saying that they're interested in diversifying how they sponsor their single championship, essentially. And it's a fascinating business story and sheds a lot of light on their business model and whether this will be successful or not. It's a little bit foreign to us in pro sports in America because we don't have necessarily these same kinds of arrangements, but in international pro sports, especially in soccer, it's not that strange. So let's dive in here. Smart, dumb, interesting.
Well, first of all, let's talk about what NASCAR is. And yeah, I'm not a race fan. You know, I could name Dale Earnhardt Jr. because he's a Redskins fan. That's about the limit of my NASCAR knowledge. I don't watch
I'm
it.
a Cale Yarborough guy, so.
Okay, so you know more than I do. If you're a fan of somebody.
I think he's out 75, 76. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. But NASCAR is the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing. It is a privately held for-profit business. So this is not like the NFL, which is the NFL front office had a tax-free status, and there's sort of legal monopolies going on with the NFL. This is just a private for-profit company that hosts racing events, okay? And the idea, and understand who NASCAR fans are in terms of their sponsor loyalties. NASCAR fans are historically known as extremely loyal to brands sanctioned by NASCAR and who sponsor NASCAR, and particularly brands that are sponsors of their favorite drivers. And so NASCAR, more than other sports, have to pay particular attention to who their sponsors are and what happens to their sponsors, because it does have a direct business impact, more so than fans of other sports. Like, I don't think fans of the Redskins are going to care if Coke or Pepsi is I don't think Redskin fans are going to care if Coke or Pepsi is a Redskin sponsor particularly. NASCAR fans care very much, and so they are hypersensitive to this. So it's the reason why NASCAR signed a 1-year extension with Monster to extend their title sponsorship just a year is because this is a major deal for them, and they want to have more time to kind of figure out how it works. So the general gist of what's happening here is they want to go from a title sponsorship to basically no title sponsor, but a series of corporate sponsors that will ultimately make them more money. What kind of money are we talking about here? The Monster deal is worth about $20 million a year. So that's the kind of money we're talking about. It is a lot of money. It's fascinating that they want to change their business model like this. And what's the fascinating part about it is they want to do it in a way that doesn't alienate their customers, since they're so hypersensitive. Their customers are so hypersensitive to their sponsors. Fascinating. Chris?
I'm curious to see. I mean, NASCAR's taking a bit of a risk because, one check, one sponsor, kind of is simpler. So to diversify the ways in which you sponsor, that means you have to have the plethora of sponsors ready to come in and buy, they're essentially turning all of NASCAR as a business and as a league or syndicate or whatever it is, more like the cars themselves with the individual sponsorships and the kind of, logo soup that are on cars. So that means they have to at least be banking on the fact that they have enough sponsors and enough of an audience that they can afford to go away from the, one big check, one big sponsor, and have enough to not only to equal that, but to elevate it.
One issue that rises to the top of my head, having done some of these sponsorship agreements, is I think they need to be careful about drivers and car teams that have conflicting sponsors. How do you handle that? Because if they have, Coke as, say, a major sponsor of NASCAR is under this new philosophy, well, some of these drivers are probably sponsored by Pepsi, for example. And I'm just making this up. I don't know who's sponsored by who. But in that case, you're requiring drivers to participate in races that are sponsored by a sponsor that may put them in breach of their own contracts, because a driver's sponsorship contract says if you're a Coke driver, or you're a Budweiser, but that's a bad example. Trying to think, if your car sponsor is an opposing energy drink, for example, well, the idea of driving for a league that is sponsored by Monster may be a contract violation. So, they need to, that's a bad example too, but you get my drift. I think they need to be careful about how they work these sponsorships so they don't inadvertently put their drivers in breach of contract or their teams in breach of contract. So.
That's actually a great point. I hadn't even thought about that. There's so much. You're just adding to the complexity of sponsorships here and league versus individual team. Yeah.
It's a very complicated issue. It's just, I don't know if we need to spend too much more time on this. I mean, it's an interesting topic because it's such a major change to how this organization does business. And although the three of us are not fans, NASCAR, it has a huge following. It was born in the South, and so it's more popular in the South, but there are racetracks all over the country now. And something like the Daytona 500 is drawing hundreds of thousands, like 200,000 fans just to the event alone, to say nothing about TV ratings. It's like bigger than the Super Bowl in terms of the number of people they draw. So this is not just because we're not fans does not mean it's not a huge money-making event.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, NASCAR is huge. I mean, it's huge. I have friends down south that swear by it, and they have a huge following. It's like one of those, I guess you could say it's a niche sport, kind of like, I don't know if you would consider hockey a niche sport, but maybe it is. 'Cause,
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider hockey a niche sport.
Well, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is niche, I think, but it also is a huge niche.
Excuse
right?
me,
That's a sort
niche.
of.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We can. I don't even know who's right. That's how I say it. But it's like it is one probably. I think just the fact that they're driving cars almost helps it to always be. But with just a ginormous following, and I find it fascinating that they have such brand loyalty. You don't see that. You might see that in other parts of pop culture broadly, but you don't see that in professional sports, even in something as contentious as the shoe market. And you don't see that kind of brand loyalty, and you see the leagues and teams and individual players switch those allegiances all the time, and probably to not much detriment of their fan. I mean, maybe Jordan and Nike's is one, but other than that, you don't see the kind of loyalty fan to product that you do in NASCAR. So I wonder if kind of smashing it into a bunch of different pieces actually forces NASCAR to be more like the other sports. In fact, lessen the fan loyalty to brand.
Well, that's what I was trying to say, and I just said it poorly. So, Chris, you said what I was trying to express, which is I think that's the big picture fear, is that by doing this, NASCAR is going to kind of get in the way of some of these brand loyalty issues. That's what I was trying to say, and it just didn't come out.
Do any of you know the history of stock car racing in NASCAR?
I mean, it goes back to the 30s.
Yeah, it goes back to illegal liquor running. So
yeah,
because in the Mid-Atlantic South, Southeast, those were basically the routes to move liquor. So they would get, including Joe Gibbs's dad, they would get hotshot young driving studs, and recruit them and soup up the cars this way. And so once Prohibition, once we were allowed to drink again, the need for that obviously decreased. And so that it went to a path of the sport.
Well, I mean, unless Bo and Luke Duke and Uncle Jesse were a part of that, that's about as close as I've gotten to, watching, young driving studs. But yeah, I mean, a neighbor invited me over to his house once to watch the Daytona 500. I mean, he had a huge spread, and I went just to be neighborly, but I was just kind of like,
to me, I just don't find it interesting, particularly. They're just driving
no disrespect to those guys, and I do know that they have like a huge following, and it's so funny, like geographically, in our country, we're all NFL fans. I assume we're all NBA fans. Hockey is tolerable. Actually like playoff hockey. I can understand it. But there are other parts of the country where things are niche, as Chris says, that that people like. And for example, not to get totally off, but a buddy of mine lives in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, and he said SEC football is way bigger than NFL football down in that country. So again, they have huge followings in areas that we probably don't even know about with NASCAR.
Yeah, I think we've beaten this to death at this point. It's an interesting topic. I think it's worth watching. We know that a lot of you out there are NASCAR fans, and we wanted to bring it up and mention it because it just raises a whole host of issues. So we'll have to check back in on this in a year or so and see how this process is going for them.
The only thing we haven't said that needs to be said is that Monster Energy drink is gross, and they should be sponsoring nothing. How is poison water allowed to be?
I've never had it. I don't know if
drink
it's
that
gross
stuff.
or not.
It's
I don't.
It's
Yeah,
liquid
it
poison.
sounds like a really awful idea,
Yeah.
personally. To drink
Yeah,
that
you
stuff.
might as well package the same motor oil that they're putting in their cars. In fact, they take way better care of what goes into their cars than what they sell people to put in their bodies. But
It
that's
should
a different
probably
topic.
so.
My only vice is Pepsi, so I'll stick with that. I'll stick to that liquid poison, whatever you want to call it.
All right. There we go with liquid poison as our exit. You can find us all in various forms online. Steve likes to camp out and squat at the Hogsty Twitter account. Rich, give us your disco-themed handle once again.
Disco QUE DISCOQUE 5 on Twitter, and you may also find me somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States.
Okay.
That's not very specific.
Where's Rich? It's a new game. I'm at ChrisLarry33. And please, with all three of us, please add us with your comments, your questions, your suggestions for future shows, your insults, and your compliments. We would love to hear you on any of those or all of those three channels simultaneously, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
All right, guys. Take it easy. Be safe.